Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Andrew Erickson and by Chris Welsh. Fellas, it is our Tuesday show. We didn't have one of these in week one because it didn't really make sense. We hadn't seen actual games yet. This will be our every week Tuesday show going forward. We're going to talk about some players to buy, some players to sell, some players to trade. We're going to get some strategy advice from Erickson. It's going to look a little bit different than last year's show did, but it's still going to be the same basic premise of we're talking some buys, we're talking some sells, we're talking some trades every single Tuesday of this season. Erickson, we were on the show together last year. Excited for this iteration of the Tuesday show?
Oh, I am thrilled. Be back with you, Worm, of course, and with the Welsh joining us here on the trade show, talking buy low, sell high. We're going to be talking some sell low and buy high, because I think that there are certain circumstances where, yeah, a player may be expensive, but he's worth paying up for. And there are other players where the bottom's going to fall out and you need to get out now before things get worse, before they get better. So I really don't think that we need to be so strict towards buy low, sell high, because that's what the majority kind of looks at. And if everyone's doing the same thing, you're not really gaining any edge. So that's kind of a way we're approaching this year. So really excited about it.
Yeah, you might have noticed I was being very particular with my words. It's players to buy and players to sell, because you're right. It can be buy highs. In addition to buy lows, it can be whatever stands out to us each week. Same with sell lows and sell highs. Welsh, this was kind of a guest spot, weekly rotating. We really liked the guests we had last year, but we decided we want the Welsh every week on the Tuesday show this year.
Let's go. I'm excited. My tag team partner, Andrew Erickson, I think this is our third or fourth show we're going to do weekly. So it's my tag team partner. We're doing, I didn't know we were doing stretches. If everybody saw in the beginning, Erickson was just like working out the arms. So I'm like, all right, let's all just like stretch. Let's get ready for week 2. It did feel like we got kind of put through the ringer a little bit in a lot of good and bad ways, but I'm very excited to be here with you both and talking about all of these buys and buys, sells, whatever we got to do. I'm into it. Let's go.
Some of the folks who got put through the ringer in week 1 were Christian McCaffrey managers. When it's relevant, we will react to Monday Night Football on the show. We won't do it every week, but we have to talk about McCaffrey. Sudden last minute not playing. Jordan Mason went off. So if you had him and were able to slide him into your lineup, which a lot of people were not able to do, if you were able to, that was awesome. If you weren't, you just kind of got unfortunately screwed by this McCaffrey news that apparently we didn't know was coming, but the team may have known as early as Friday night, at least according to what Jordan Mason said. Kyle Shanahan did kind of disagree with that afterwards. Obviously, that's what he was going to say. What else would he say? You get caught
in a lie. You usually try to wiggle your way out.
And Mason was saying, like, this is why I don't like talking to the media. You say one wrong thing, and it's like, yeah, but you said the wrong thing. Like, you said it. We didn't force you to say it.
Clearly, you're a backup, so.
Well, you've been kind of on the McCaffrey trade for a lot of the summer, like not overly concerned. Are you rethinking everything?
So now I get an out. Listen, I was completely right about Ayuk. Erickson was wrong. Debro was super wrong. I'm super wrong. Like I was telling these guys before the show, this is what's going to turn me into like a tinfoil hat guy. I was trying to be a complete realist to it. They told us we're not worried about it. He's going to be out there. We're just resting him. Took them on their words. What did they say earlier this week? He's going to be good to go. We got Christian. Great. And then bam, we are smacked with all these lies. So everybody that had that little cautiousness, my problem always was the injury, which seemed to be really played down, was being used as a little bit of an excuse, which ended up being right, around players don't repeat their production and being like the number 1 overall player. I think the narrative that, well, Christian McCaffrey's it's really hard to be the number 1 overall guy again. This injury was used as the narrative to kind of push that. And it ended up being super correct. So I feel like this is going to now make me be injury tinfoil hat guy, because every single little bump and bruise for anybody, I'm going to now question, because this was a brutal blow that nobody expected. And it is wrong because, and I'm a huge proponent of everybody that will take that win when a player doesn't play for a couple weeks and then is awesome for the rest of the season. They're like, oh, see, I was right the whole time. And it's like, well, you didn't get 2 or 3 weeks of production out of this awesome player you think is going to be amazing. That's not really a win. That's the same case here with Christian McCaffrey. It's going to be super hard for him to, if anyone can do it, it's him to bounce back from it. But this is a huge L on my take on it. And then the last thing, this was a huge reminder. Put the Monday Night Football guys in your flex spots when given the opportunity, because I had a league where this could have been saved a tiny bit because I have a ton of Jordan Mason. And you might have at least had a Alan Lazard who could have been on the bench, thrown him in, and it could have saved your week. When applicable, put your guys in the flex going into Monday Night Football for some craziness like this to happen.
It's just about the simplest piece of advice we can give, but it's so important. Like, I don't know why it is. There's like this mental block of like, this guy's my starter. He's my first round pick. I want him in the running back spot, not the lowly flex spot.
Yeah.
Like, no, the points count the same. It's just smarter when they're on Monday night or Sunday night. Like, whoever is playing in the later game, do it. Even if it's Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern versus Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, just put those guys in flex. You're right. So this was clearly Welsh's Joker origin story. Erickson, for you, if McCaffrey's out another week, Jordan Mason is going to be a top what running back for you in week 2 rankings?
Top 15 at least. I mean,
I was gonna say like top 12. How do you keep him out of the top 12?
He wasn't involved in the passing game at all. So
sure, but I think this team's going to be in a lot of running, game scripts.
28 carries are pretty good to take you off of needing to care about the receptions. I think he might have to be a top 10.
Who they're playing? They're on the road against Minnesota, I believe. Yeah,
that's the team that they can beat up on. I mean, I know Minnesota looks good, but
and Breece Hall, I can say that for sure.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Good take. That's a good take.
All right, let's jump into the show here. Like I said, it's our buys, it's our sells, and it's our trades. We're going to start off every week with a little segment from Erickson where he kind of breaks down some overall strategy. This can be kind of more macro level. It can be more micro level. It can be whatever direction Erickson wants to take it. But his going into week 2, his main piece of strategy advice, given what we just saw in week 1 and what we know going into week 2. Erickson, what is your advice this week?
Yeah, so I have a couple bullet points that I want to talk about here on my Ask Andrew segment. My own newspaper ask advice segment. So the first thing with week 1, the reactions, right? We spend all months of the summer trying to craft the perfect rankings for each player and their outlooks. And week 1 happens and we're flooded with a lot of new information. And a lot of it's great. A lot of it's very actionable, but a lot of it is also an overreaction, especially when it comes to some of the receiver, tight end types of performances where we know wide receivers and tight ends traditionally are more volatile on a week-to-week basis. That's why we look at spike weeks. That's why that's a thing when we talk about receivers and tight ends. So I want to be selling the message that sometimes these things don't carry over through the entire season. Really look at these player stat lines and think, hey, is this sustainable for the rest of the year? So I'm not saying to ignore everything, but I'm also saying when the market is determining, hey, this happened in week 1 and this is truth, this is never going to change, this is where you can somewhat take advantage. So I do think that in week 2, heading into week 2, this is a week to be the most aggressive. Looking back at last year, again, just an example, Calvin Ridley, right? Monster game in week 1. He was viewed as going to be a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. And what happened? That did not fizzle out whatsoever. But you were sitting on Ridley as, hey, I could just sell high on this guy right now, cash out, and not worry about the future whatsoever for a more proven producer, and you would have been gold. So that's just like something to kind of keep in mind and think about. I think that you should use the rest of the season rankings that we have over on FantasyPros. I think it gives you a good perception of, okay, how have the values changed on certain players? Maybe you were avoiding a certain player because you thought their ADP was too high. Well, look at the rest of the season rankings. Where would they now be drafted? If you were drafting your team today, maybe they are now a round 4 pick instead of a round 2 pick. Okay, like now you're in on that player because you're not taking on as much risk as you would have when you would have drafted them in round 2. So those are some of my overarching thoughts just on the landscape and how the rankings have shifted on a specific level from this past week. Elite tight end, right? Every elite tight end bombed, essentially. There was no great, except for Isaiah Likely, so who I was told was an elite tight end. I just didn't know. And he was on my bench. He's the reason why I lost to Worm in our Fantasy Pros content league because I started Mark Andrews instead. So I think that this is a week where if you went late round tight end, this is a week to go fishing for an elite tight end that you maybe like that you just didn't draft, because everybody right now is feeling, oh my God, my tight end sucks. Everyone feels that right now. So I think this is a great opportunity to buy the dip, because part of the tight end strategy is you're chasing that upside. But in week 1, everybody busted. So now all the prices have suppressed even further among the elite tight ends. And I think that creates a buying opportunity to try to take on one of these guys after they had a bad week. And then the last thing, when you're trying to craft a trade, again, you can use the trade analyzer tools as part of my playbook. I think that's a really good starting point. But what you can also do is look at the teams that may be looking for help at certain positions. The Puka Nacua manager, Chris Olave, Drake London, Marvin Harrison, Amon-Ra St. Brown. They may not want to trade those guys because, hey, I invested a high pick. I don't want to trade this guy. But they may be slightly concerned that, well, maybe I should look for another wide receiver just in case. So look at these managers, not necessarily to target the players that did bad because they know that you're trying to buy low on them, but instead approach them with, well, here, do you want this other receiver instead? Maybe that's a better way to approach it. And the same thing with some of the running backs that were in more of committees than we projected. Travis Etienne, Rachaad White, Jalen Warren coming off the injury, Javonte Williams after a bad game. You don't necessarily need to target these specific players, but target these managers that have these players on their teams that are looking to potentially make moves. And again, look at how you can also improve their roster too. You can only swindle so many people in so many different ways for people to stop making trades with you altogether. So those are my kind of trade strategies heading into this week. Thank you for joining me for the segment, and let's get back to the show.
That was Andrew Erickson.
Yeah, his advice column for every week. If the tight ends are bad this year, considering how heavily I invested in elite tight end as a strategy, just anybody in that top 7, that will be my Joker origin story, because I was told this is the year that tight ends are finally back, and it was a very poor showing in week 1. Welsh, I'm curious your thoughts on what Erickson laid out here. And, everybody calls it overreaction week. It's a week of panicking. It's a week of, we all know we're overreacting, and yet we still do it. It's like we're highlighting that we're doing this dumb thing of overreacting to 1 week. You go back and look at what the scoring leaders were after week 1 last year, and it's like a hilarious comical list. And yet we still do this every year. So how much do you try to not react to what you've seen in week 1 to avoid overreacting? When you're approaching trades, what's your level of I'm trying to self-modulate how much I am overreacting?
Yeah, I would say that's 95%. That's kind of me in general. I'm a little bit more of a tougher trade partner in that I don't want to decimate values. So I guess how I would say it is I'm the one that doesn't want to overreact. I'm looking for the overreactor, because you're not going to have me be the one. I have a lot of Mark Andrews. Me and Erickson both do. I'm not going to sell off him cheap. There's any underperforming grade player. Chris Olave, I wouldn't be selling for cheap. I'm not selling any of these guys for cheap because I'm super concerned. I'm going to be pinpointing and looking for the person that's in their league chat going, can you believe I spent this pick on blah, blah, blah? I'm going to be targeting that person. So it's important for me to hold back any of my crazy concerns and go and target the person that is having that panic attack and getting up on those values. Because you're right, there's only so much we can take from week 1. We are going to be using week 1 analysis here to talk about some buys and sells. Even in the sell territory, it's a really tough argument for us to be we got to sell this guy because of what happened in week 1. So there's going to have to be greater stories around all of that. But at the end of the day, I try not to have an overreaction. As the live stream person told us as we were doing our reaction show we do on Sunday nights live streaming, the very first comment was, it's only week 1. It's only week 1. It's only week 1. It's a good mantra. Just remember, it's only week 1 before you start to blow stuff up.
TD, Tutty, taking it to the house, in for 6. Whatever you call a touchdown, one thing's for sure, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We just want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. One super fun matchup in week 2 is Rams-Cardinals. This NFC West battle has one of the highest totals on DraftKings this week at 50, so there should be plenty of touchdowns to go around in this one. It's also one of the closest spreads, with Arizona laying just a point. Lines and odds subject to change on that, of course, but it's a really compelling matchup this Sunday. Should be touchdowns galore. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, guys, let's go into our players to buy segment. We're going to start with the running backs. Welsh, who is your running back to buy right now?
So this might not be a crazy big popular name, and this wasn't the thing I liked so much about this player was that I don't think they walked out of this week where people are like, oh my, actually the running back we're going to talk about in cells had this huge, big performance. But I think it was good enough and some of the underlying stuff was good enough that Tony Pollard is a player that I would try to go buy because once again, I think what was his preseason value? Somewhere between 26, 28, maybe into the 30s, like right outside and bordering that running back 2 to flex option. And as good as the performance was, it's a bad team context. I'm just not sure what he did is going to make people grip and hold tight. Where I think with what I saw in the usage, this is a guy that can firmly be an RB2 with maybe a tiny bit more upside the rest of the year. 16 for 82, average over 5 yards per carry. 61% of his yards this week came after contact. And that's a really interesting thing, too, when we talk about the sell candidate that I'm going to bring up, where they did everything not being touched. He had the most yards in gap schemes this week came from Ramondre Stevenson, 85 yards. And if anybody paid attention, he had like 11 broken tackles. He was awesome. He was phenomenal. He made it work. But the third person who did that, who had the most in the gap scheme, was Tony Pollard. He had 72 yards from that with missed tackles, all those yards coming after contact. And the volume. I mean, I'm just giving you just some stats of what he did as a runner. I love that he was able to maintain yards after contact, but they gave him the volume, 16 carries. We know they're going to pass it to him out of the backfield. He had the snap percentage over Tyjae Spears, and that was something that we saw in preseason that did carry over into this game. He was relatively effective. The underlying stuff supports it, and I just don't think there's any big juice on him, and it's really hard to buy in. We could have talked about Christian McCaffrey, I suppose, at this point. But what other running backs could you really go in and talk about buying right now? I think if I'm buying on a week 1 guy, it's either a crazy low discount on a player that underperformed, like you're talking about with McCaffrey, or trying to buy in a player that performed well that doesn't spark up, I can't trade this player. I do think you can go and move on a guy like Tony Pollard. And I think he probably could be traded for at the same equity he was drafted at. And I think there's a lot of upside there. So I was really encouraged by Tony Pollard's performance this week and where it is moving forward, especially carries versus Tyjae in him. So Tony Pollard is going to be the RB I'm looking to buy.
I was all over Pollard this summer. I'm not like victory lapping yet. It's only been 1 week, but I was really encouraged by what I saw. I wanted to be above consensus on him in my draft rankings, and I'm feeling good about that right now. Not only 80% of the running back carries in this game, but he also had the same number of targets as Tyjae Spears. So it's not like Spears then turned around and dominated the passing work. So like I said, I was really encouraged by this. If anything, the main thing I was discouraged by was just Will Levis, and it makes me a little more nervous for the offense throughout the course of the season. But I'm definitely buying into the fact that Pollard is like even more fully back from the injury. Erickson, that's a point you were on a lot, was that last year he wasn't even fully healthy until about week 11. Do you agree with Pollard as a buy?
Oh, I love this pick, Welsh. You're hitting it out of the park right from the get-go. So I think that this is a perfect buy opportunity because it's the low-key winners from week 1 that you really want to attack. Again, you look at Pollard's box score and you're not, blown away. I can't trade for this guy. He did too good. It's like when you score 3 touchdowns. Well, you can't buy him because you got to trade a leg and an arm to get him. But Tony Pollard, low-key, it's like, wow, this is like really encouraging. And you look at what he did. That was against a pretty tough Bears run defense on the road. They're playing at home against the New York Jets defense, who we just saw on Monday Night Football get run all over the place by Chris McCaffrey's backup. So, again, I think
what were they doing? Gap to gap runs, by the way. I'm going to put it just Jordan Mason, gap to gap. And that is where Tony Pollard thrived this week.
So we were sold that, hey, it's going to be 50-50 split. It's going to be 50-50 split. Week 1 comes. Not a 50-50 split. So I think that this makes a ton of sense. And I think that we should be a little bit lower on Spears if they really are trying to feature Tony Pollard more. If he's the hot hand, then he's going to get more of the opportunities.
Yeah, we are in complete agreement across the board on Tony Pollard. And I totally agree, too, that he's the right type of player to be targeting because he's attainable. And there are guys that are unattainable that may be disappointed. He is not one of them. So I love the pick. Erickson, who's your running back to buy?
I'm going with Achane. So this would fall into the category of buying high on a player because he's kind of checking off the boxes of things that I wanted to see from him in week 1. Looks explosive, and he has a insane role in the passing game. You look what he did. Basically, he's operating as the Dolphins' third wide receiver, essentially. 32% target rate. He caught all 7 of his targets for 76 yards. This guy rushed for 24 yards on 10 carries. You look at that stat line and he he was a bust this week. No, no, Devon Achane was a great start this past week. And we're already starting to see, yes, he's a little bit banged up, but so is Raheem Mostert. So that's why we saw Jeff Wilson kind of come in at the end of the game. The Dolphins, I don't know how effective they're going to be running the game or with their run game. They have some issues with the offensive line, maybe just because Jacksonville has a really good defensive line. That remains to be seen. But it's the pass game usage that I just feel so good about with Achane, that it's going to help him with that floor. And then if he's in space, man, he was breaking so many tackles. He looked so great, so elusive. And if this Mostert injury lingers, then we're going to see more of Achane, especially around the goal line. Also in week 1, the red zone carries, not Mostert, not like last year. It was Achane that was getting those red zone opportunities. He got 2 targets in the red zone. So for me, again, looking at this a little bit differently, not trying to buy low on a running back. I'm trying to buy high on Achane because, yes, he was drafted really highly. So he's already kind of viewed in that realm, but he checked off the boxes of what I'm looking for. And because he's dealing with some type of injury, we don't know what his status is for Thursday, so you have to monitor that. But that may actually be the window to buy on Achane because someone may be concerned, oh, well, he's banged up already. It's week 1. But I don't know. I just love what I saw from him in week 1.
I forget who it was. Somebody early on in that slate on Sunday tweeted, like, if Achane is getting this kind of work in the passing game and this kind of work at the goal line, he probably should have been the 101. Like, just given what we know about his explosiveness and his efficiency, like, adding on this usage, if he's healthy, like, what is the downside here? Erickson, are there any big name running backs that you would maybe surprisingly be willing to trade away to acquire Achane?
Kyren Williams.
I would agree with that.
Again, you gotta pay up to get Achane, and they were drafted.
Achane in some instances was going above Kyren. I think you'd have to let go of like a Jameer Gibbs. Would you do Gibbs? You don't think
Kyren gets it done with the 90% snap share blanking Blake Corum? I feel like.
Well, it's a good point by Welsh that Kyren was going after Achane in some of my drafts, but also part of the reason for that was like a fear of Blake Corum. And
exactly.
Now
remember, he's returning kicks, guys. Just remember, he's returning kicks, so that's very scary.
What about Erickson? What about your guy, Travis Etienne?
I would take
him or Achane.
What about Gibbs? Achane. What about Gibbs?
I think it's pretty close. I think Gibbs is probably safer. I think he's probably safer to hold on to.
Welsh, what do you think about this pick?
Yeah, I love it. I loved hearing him also talk about how much he just they're just killing the going in him, running out of the slot and playing wide receiver. He's down. He's good to go with it. The goal line usage, I think, was absolutely key with Achane. That was like a game changer when they didn't just bring in Mostert. The injury thing could be a little bit of fool's gold here. We didn't get to see Mostert unleashed in any capacity, so you do kind of want to see what it is full on. But I think that is like a floor conversation, because if Mostert is running the ball more, they're going to want to get the ball in Achane's hand. He's essentially becoming the slot wide receiver. Last night on the Monday Night Football game, they're talking about how Christian McCaffrey would be a Pro Bowler just if he was a slot receiver. We might be talking about the same thing with Achane. Books didn't want to release his reception prop until Sunday. They don't want to do it. Achane is a guy who is a 100-yard, total yard guy every week potential player. So I like it if I get a discount. I'd love to get a little bit more of a discount than we're talking about. I just don't think there's a lot of room for those RBs. You're like, what high RB would you trade? There's like 6 that were above Achane. Achane was going sometimes as the 7th, 8th running back. So I'd love to get and be able to trade a Kyren or get a slight discount because someone's worried. I don't know what even value looks like. I think even value is a pretty big trade, and it might be, a Garrett Wilson coming off of whatever that performance was. I think it'd have to be something big, and I probably would still do it, but I'm into this.
It's time for this week's player we would trade almost anything for, brought to you by Uber Eats. This week, that player is Welsh's wide receiver to buy, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. Welsh, why are we giving up almost anything for the rookie?
Well, I mean, that's a big statement.
I was like, whoa.
I'm definitely not going to give up everything. I actually also want to bring this. I'm going to give the take in here. I also want to open this up because there's 2 sides of it. If there was one player that exemplified go buy them, that's going to create worry, it is Marvin Harrison. I guess Olave and Drake London both had bad weeks, but the establishment of these players isn't going to have people panicking. But a rookie going in and having the lack of targets and the performance that Marvin Harrison had, people were freaking out. The positive, Marvin Harrison still played most of the snaps. I think he was the top snap wide receiver. He had the 4th best routes run per drop back in the NFL this week. 89.5 routes were run on dropbacks. But some of the negatives was he was only first read 14% of the time. And I think you can read that as, well, that will change. Yes, most likely. But there's a concerning thing with Marvin Harrison, and it's his separation. And I think a lot of people were starting to focus on that. He didn't seem to be coming out of breaks really great. He had negative separation scores pretty much across the board. But it was his first game. Like, they went to the safety net. What's one of the things you can see? Where did Kyler Murray go with his first read and his targets? He went to the middle. He went to his tight end and Greg Dortch, to slot wide receiver. They weren't going out deep. They weren't comfortable with it. Kyler Murray wasn't comfortable, and there's not an established connection between these two. It's going to get there. We're going to be able to get there. This is a guy that has created the most panic. And jokes aside, I'm not trading anything to get him, but I still think the floor is inside the top 20 of a wide receiver that he can be. And I think people don't know what they're going to make out of it. So if there's a player that exemplifies going and trying to buy for them, it is Marvin Harrison after that performance. But I do think there's a question, and I'm curious what Erickson feels on this, about what we saw as far as like him coming out the breaks and his ability for separation versus just having no volume, because he will be the first read wide receiver. He will get targets. They're not going to not let that happen. It's just, are we going to get there with him? And are you worried at all about some of that, negative separation? And like I said, just coming out slow on the routes run.
I think for me, looking back at this was just a really bad matchup overall for Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, if he's acting as that downfield threat, you look at Kyler Murray, he completed one pass over 10 air yards in the game. They were not attacking downfield. And what do we know in this Bills defense under Sean McDermott? They don't let up big plays. That's what they do. On the broadcast, they said they literally have a safety over the top of Marvin Harrison on almost all the dropbacks for Kyler Murray. So that's why he wasn't looking for him. On the final play of the game, Harrison's wide open. Why do you think Murray's not looking his way? Because there's been a safety there every single play of the game. So yes, when you look up buy low wide receiver in the dictionary, there's a picture of Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah.
I think that this is the sharpest move to make. I was always, during draft season, I was hesitant to push the button on Marvin Harrison in round 2, but that's where the reshuffling of the deck happens now, because now people are looking back and thinking, oh my God, why did I take this guy at the start of round 2? If you look at rest of season rankings, he's probably valued closer to a round 3, round 4 pick. Now, okay, if you reverse it, how would you feel about taking him in round 3 or 4? I asked myself that question. And I think, yeah, because that's right where Malik Neighbors was going. I feel like I talked about this before on leading up to the season, where I felt like their ADPs should have been closer together. It should have been Neighbors either closer to Harrison. And after week 1, I think that the rest of season rankings are probably closer to each other. So yeah, I think that the matchup did not call for Marvin Harrison Jr. to have a big game against this Bills defense. And you look at who they're playing in week 2, they're back in the Dome against the Los Angeles Rams, who don't have lockdown outside cornerbacks. How did the Lions attack the Rams in week 1? Jameson Williams, downfield. That's going to be Marvin Harrison's role. So again, I didn't love the ADP. But I love the strategy of getting him now when he's coming at the discount, because people are concerned after week 1 as a rookie. So Welsh, again, just continue to knock it out of the park.
So there you have it. We would trade almost anything for Marvin Harrison Jr. That was this week's Uber Eats Player of the Week. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. All right, Erickson, you wanted to go off the board and not pick a wide receiver for your wide receiver to buy. You wanted to go with a pass catcher, in this case, a tight end.
I had to go with Mark Andrews here because as my buy low target, because I was very stressed out on Thursday night. Seeing Isaiah Likely just absolutely go off. Mark Andrews on his limited opportunities just look so horrible out there. And I know Worm, again, as a Ravens fan, this was obviously like concerning because I knew you were drafting Andrews as well. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, guys, like Friday night, I watched a movie with my wife and I'm pretty sure I did not retain any of the information from the film because I was so focused on, oh my God, I told people to draft Mark Andrews. What is going on? So after Sunday played out, I felt a little bit better because all the other tight ends also did really bad. So didn't feel as guilty, but I look at the situation with Andrews, and the usage was still good in terms of he played more snaps than likely. He still was running more routes than likely. And I know there's been a couple threads posted. Andy Holloway, the fantasy footballer, has posted a thread basically talking about how Andrews was blanketed on basically almost all of his routes. And when you just look at what Andrews has done traditionally against the Steve Spagnuolo defense with the Chiefs, Andrews in 5 games against the Chiefs has gone over 22 yards and 3 catches 1 time with 0 touchdowns in all 5 games. So I think this was just a very matchup driven result of a player that missed a lot of time leading up to the season because he was in a minor car accident. Again, he also was coming off an injury from last year, even though he appeared in the playoff game.
It wasn't a minor accident, by the way.
Well,
like he came away without a scratch, but like the report was that it was a serious accident. He just got very lucky and didn't have a scratch on.
Yeah. So again, going back to how much of was he in the game plan? That matters a lot because if they're not sure, okay, how effective is Andrews going to be in this particular matchup? We already know that the Chiefs are going to scheme him away. So let's not make him the focal point. I mean, Lamar was so dialed in on Likely, seemingly on every single drop back, because I think that it was just, that was the game plan. They really wanted to feature Likely in this particular match because they knew they were going to take away Andrews. And the thing that gives me some hope with Andrews, again, just from the consistency he's done and shown as a tight end in the NFL, again, I don't think that he's washed. He's 29 years old. We've seen tight ends way past 30 years old be still productive in this in the NFL. And the last thing is, Jackson was not great in the red zone. 1 for 8. I know that the likely touchdown was very, very close, but Worm, tell me if I'm wrong. Isn't Mark Andrews Lamar's guy in the red zone? 1 for 8. I just think that, you're looking for that touchdown upside. And I think us watching those games, was the Ravens offense amazing? Yes. Lamar Jackson looked amazing scrambling, but the drop back passing game, I think that there were some holes. Maybe that's where they need Andrews to being that threat over the middle of the field. So I think that this is a great buy low opportunity. I will admit that I don't think that Andrews probably has that tight end 1 upside like I thought originally. I did move him down in the rest of the season rankings behind Trey McBride, Sam Laporta. But even with Likely's presence, who I don't think goes away, I think that we could see both tight ends be usable in this offense because I do think that Andrews is still that guy, especially in the red zone. And if he's scoring touchdowns, he's going to be able to help you in your lineup. So Worm, as the Ravens guy, am I totally off my rocker here? What do you say?
I don't think you're off your rocker. So what I would say first and foremost, and I was talking about this with Debro earlier today, actually, don't ever overreact to a Ravens-Chiefs game. The Ravens, they have this mental block with Kansas City ever since the Mahomes-Lamar era began. They play these Chiefs games differently. They circle them on the calendar like it's their Super Bowl. They treat it differently. Like I saw Debro was saying, like, hey, it's not sustainable for Lamar to run 16 times in a game. He only did that because this is the Chiefs. Like this is like they approach these games differently. They kind of lose their minds during the games. We saw in the AFC Championship game where they stopped running the ball. Like I would not have any real takeaways, setting aside the fact that it was the first game with this young, inexperienced offensive line trying to gel together, going up against Chris Jones of all people and Steve Spagnuolo of all people. Like, I just would not put too much stock into the game plan. This was Lamar like putting on a Superman cape and, hey, you know what was working? Check downs to Justice Hill and finding Isaiah Likely. So let's just keep spamming that and see if we can come away with this victory against the defending champs in their place on opening night. Like, I would take so little away from this. Having said all that, Isaiah Likely is not going anywhere. So Agreed. I totally agree that Mark Andrews is a buy low, but I also agree that you really can't have him as tight end 1 because Likely is going to be a significant part of this offense. A, he looked like a bona fide superstar, and B, they need him. Like, besides Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews himself, they don't have anybody else. Like, Rachaad Bateman had one really nice catch towards the end of the game, but like, Likely will not just be a part of this offense. He will be a significant part of this offense. I just think Andrews will too. The last thing I'll say is I didn't think he was washed or anything. I started to maybe question that when he fell down short of the sticks.
It was horrible,
that
dude.
Was
it looked so
brutal.
bad.
That was absolutely terrible. That was one where like you almost cringe watching it. Like, I can't. Like, what happened to this player that I love?
Here's my tight end 1. There he goes.
Yeah, that one was disconcerting. But no, in general, like I saw the same threads about how much double coverage he was facing. Like, obviously, like in watching the game, it was like a little confusing why they weren't going to him more. There was also like 1 or 2 times he was targeted that got called back on penalty. So that makes it look like he got targeted, even fewer times. Again, Likely is not going anywhere, but I agree that Andrew, if somebody's panicking, if somebody's saying, oh, Isaiah Likely is now the tight end 1 in Baltimore and Mark Andrews is not a top 12 tight end, take advantage of that. Like that will not be the case. And short of running the ball with Derrick Henry, I don't think there will be a player that gets more usage in the red zone throughout the course of the season in this offense than Mark Andrews will. Welsh, what do you think about Andrews?
Yeah, I'm in. I mean, like here's my only question though, is there was a plan. Like the Chiefs know how to lock down Mark Andrews. I think that's like the most positive thing here is the Chiefs locked him down. There's plenty of upside into the future. We don't have to all go, oh, he's super old and irrelevant. Here's the only thing though, is like, I want to see, did the Ravens also go in knowing that Mark Andrews was going to be shut out? Because Mark Andrews, his first read, he was almost never the first read for Lamar Jackson. Zay Flowers, likely. So that's my only thing to think about moving. And this is someone I am heavily invested in, Mark Andrews, is just did the rate, because we're saying like, oh, they covered it, blah, blah, blah. But the Ravens, you didn't see it in any of the underlying stuff that they were like, oh, we're trying to go to Andrews. Nope, let's check off and go to likely. That wasn't happening. Like Andrews was almost never. So my only slight hesitation is to find out, and we'll get those in the next couple games, is to see, okay, did the Ravens also just know that was going to end up happening and not doing it? But I think the panic of like, oh, Mark Andrews is hurt and he's irrelevant and he's washed and stuff like that. It's like, no, like the scheme completely took him out of the game. But I agree. I'm going to third this. Likely's not going anywhere. He is going to be a playmaker for this team. So I think I just need like a week or two more to understand how this is going to readjust. That doesn't mean I wouldn't go buy on Mark Andrews right now. I'm going to need the discount. Like someone's not going to be able to try to sell him off and they're going to give him as a top 5 tight end price. I'm going to need cheaper on that because I think there are some questions, but I also think this is like a blatantly easy go buy if you can.
And also, even if he is healthy, like he did miss 2 to 3 weeks of practice, like in the and on top of like not playing in the preseason. Yeah. And we see so many players in week 1 and really into week 2 at this point in the NFL that are rusty because they don't play in preseason anymore. And like we just see it every year now. And I don't think Mark Andrews is immune from that just because he's a veteran. Like he didn't get reps in August essentially because of this car accident. So like I would not over panic on that one for sure. Let's go to the players we're going to sell. And Welsh, you're going to start with a former Raven.
I didn't want to do this one. Hand up. I didn't want to do this one. Erickson gave me props after saying I couldn't do it either. I don't want to say I was the biggest, but there are not many bigger J.K. Dobbins guys in the preseason, in draft season than me. I have him ranked very, very high. But I am putting J.K. Dobbins up here for a very specific reason. 10 carries, 130 plus yards. Absurd number this past week. It's not sustainable that he is going to continue being this guy. This is an opportunity to take advantage of a wildly explosive week in an offense that had a big running back question that feels like it was answered, but those numbers are just not sustainable. So 107 of his yards came off of explosive yards, something, we go and check out using fantasy points data. 107 of those yards came off of those explosive yards, which dictates like 15 or more yards. That's great. The problem is J.K. Dobbins, unfortunately, would not be someone I identify as explosive. Like you could see he couldn't get down the field when he broke that run and they caught him in the backfield. I think he can be good, but the majority of what he did came off of these big plays. He averaged over 10 yards before contact, before he was touched. So with just 24% of his yards coming after contact. So what I'm getting at here is lane was so big and open, he was untouched and he broke out and he had a bunch of these big yards. He had over 50% stuff rate. And my worry is that you still didn't see massive volume. He had 10 carries and he made this happen. I think J.K. Dobbins can be a nice flex RB all season. I have him on tons of teams, but coming off of that big of a performance with those explosive yards in low carry numbers, somebody might be willing to pay a really high price that kind of takes you out of needing to hold on to him. Guess what? Gus Edwards is still there. He had 11 carries in this game. He's going to still get those. This is a 2-back committee for a guy that doesn't have 4.3 speed to break those big touchdowns. That wasn't touched in this game. I just think those yards are a mirage. Not saying that he's not going to get production, and I'm not saying that he can't be a top 36 back, But if someone looks at him as a top 24 back because of those yards and they have all the answers, Gus Edwards is nothing. This is an opportunity to put him out in the market and see what people are willing to pay, because this, to me, is his best game of the season and is not representative of what we will probably see every week. Again, coming from somebody that does like him. Erickson, are you backing me on this one? Please?
I think your process is right. Like, my only concern is this Raheem Mostert 2.0, where it just seems so obvious, the process. You have to sell high on Raheem Mostert. He's 31 years old. He never stays healthy. These touchdowns are unsustainable. And then you look up and he scored 20 touchdowns. Right?
So my irony to that is, to me, and this is, I got this wrong this past week, that's Gus Edwards in this offense. And unfortunately, Dobbins is not the Achane. He is not as explosive, and he's not going to be able to be the big play guy. But the inside the 5 guy, top 12 last year in inside the 5 carries, and the 3rd highest touchdown rate last season inside the top 5 was Gus Edwards. They brought him in for that. That was my take on the touchdowns. And he had more carries than Dobbins. To me, Dobbins would be the Mostert. And I'm sorry, Gus Edwards would be the Mostert. And I'm not sure what Dobbins is in there, except kind of the bigger volume play. Sorry, I kind of retook your spot here. But you're not wrong on the Mostert side. It just, Edwards feels like he's that guy, because that is literally what he does.
Yeah. So I guess that's a way where you don't get burned if you move off of Dobbins, because like you said, you feel good that I drafted Dobbins late. He's smashing. He looks explosive. I win. But like you said, how sustainable is this? He only had 10 carries. He didn't score on either of those really long runs because he got caught from behind. And he is missing that other gear that, a healthy J.K. Dobbins a couple years ago, nobody's catching that guy. So again, this is something that I want to bring up because I think it's important. When I spoke to Edwin Porras at the FF Expo, a fantasy football doctor, injury expert, we had a conversation about J.K. Dobbins. I asked him about J.K. Dobbins because I'm like, dude, I love Dobbins. Tell me what's the deal with the Achilles? And he told me that he expected him to start out on fire and explosive out of the gates. But it was the long term that was his main concern. How long will the Achilles hold up over the season? So yes, we love Dobbins, but you got to put him on the block and you got to see what you can get for him. Again, if you can't get anything good, then just ride it out and take the value. But if you get a good deal, especially if you can upgrade at tight end or running back or receiver, if you're hurting somewhere else, then yeah. And I have enough of Dobbins where I'm probably going to trade him in just a couple spots. But do I feel great trading all of him? No, because I feel justified, right? He's hitting, he's smashing, he's healthy. But I also understand that we could look up and this ride could end very, very soon, and we could be very sad. So, Worm, to you, the last J.K. Dobbins truther.
Yeah, I was going to say, when Welsh said that, he was as high as anybody this summer on Dobbins, I looked up our draft rankings on FantasyPros. I was one spot higher than Welsh. Actually.
Oh, okay. So you're the winner.
The running back ranking.
Where did we have him? Were we top 30?
We were in the mid 30s, according to FantasyPros. So the highest was actually Mike Randall up at RB 24. So shouts to him for really believing. We were in the mid 30s. I was at RB 35. You were at RB 36. Erickson was all the way down at RB 39. So,
oh God, but I had him ahead of Gus, so that's all that matters.
Yes. No, I mean, I love Dobbins all summer. I said he was the best draft pick you can make because all of the downside was baked in and none of the upside. Like, if he's bad, you can cut him and, oh, boohoo, you're cutting your 14th round pick. Who cares? You're probably going to do that anyway. And if he hits, he was the best value in drafts. So I loved him as a pick. I'm probably not as interested in selling as you guys. I thought the long speed was missing, but everything else looked like the J.K. Dobbins of old to me, just as somebody who watched a lot of him, in the early parts of his career. And Greg Roman, once Dobbins established himself in the second half of his rookie season in Baltimore, he was the goal line guy. He was the guy getting, I think he scored a touchdown in like 7 or 8 straight games to end his rookie season. So I know that Greg Roman likes this healthy J.K. Dobbins to score touchdowns. To me, maybe he doesn't get the 80-yard touchdowns because he gets caught from behind. There was enough speed and explosiveness to break off the 40-yard run in the first place. So I think if he's getting goal line work, which I expect him to, I mean, we'll see how it plays out. It's only 1 week, but I do kind of expect that, knowing Greg Roman. And now that they've seen him, kind of proof of concept that he is healthy and can have a really great game again. We also know that like obviously there were question marks, particularly about the interior of this offensive line, but we also know that the Chargers drafted a very highly rated tackle, very high in this draft. They have Rashawn Slater still. Like, this is, I think there are spots on this offensive line that Dobbins can run behind and be very successful. So I'm not selling unless I'm getting somebody really good back. Now, maybe it's smart not maybe, it is smart to put him on the block and see what you can get. And maybe somebody does say, man, I love J.K. Dobbins as a prospect. It's so cool that he's healthy again. I just want him on my team because he's a fun guy to have, and I'm going to spend big, and you get a stud back, or at least like a more certain asset. I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not saying you can't sell him at any cost, but I wouldn't be like selling no matter what.
But I think we all agree on that. That was my like tenuous about this, is to say I'm not like panic, get him out of here, he's gonna Achilles. No, I just think you need to. It is your service to put him on the block to see if someone is willing to pay the price of what he performed. Let me ask you this then: would you trade J.K. Dobbins to get Tony Pollard?
Yeah, that's the good question. I would take Pollard.
It makes me sad to say yes, but. Yes,
but exactly,
that's reasonable.
Yeah. Yes,
yeah, that's
a deal that actually will happen in real drafts or in real leagues. So.
That's exactly right, because we're not like, okay, I'll trade my J.K. Dobbins, but you're going to have to give me Joe Mixon. We're not saying that, but like Tony Pollard in mid-20s back, I think that is a move that you can absolutely make.
A guy like Dobbins, who has such name recognition, and again, who people want to see succeed. I think for him, like if you want to go out and suggest a trade, that's fine. I think strategically what I would do is just put him on the block and see what offers come in, because I think like he is a type of guy that you could be surprised by what people might send in. And if you don't get any good bites, then that's fine. Then you go out and find the Pollard manager and offer him straight up. But, in general, I would kind of want to see what people are willing to give me for a guy like Dobbins, just because of everything with his history. And again, people like don't want to have FOMO of missing out on this really fun story that it theoretically could be, even if we kind of think it might fall off the tracks later on in the season. Let's go to the next running back here. Who are you selling, Erickson?
I'm going to sell Rachaad White, running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I never really felt super in on White during draft season. I was kind of like on the fence. I kind of liked him, but also understood that there were some concerns. Again, besides McCaffrey, he had the second largest workload among running backs last year, right up there in the total amount of snaps played. And what we saw week one was kind of more of the same, where, yes, electric in the passing game. We love Rachaad White as a receiver, but as a rusher, just still struggling to find running lanes. Again, I was optimistic in this new offense, Liam Cohen coming in, that Rachaad White, okay, maybe this guy can be a little bit more efficient on the ground. 31 yards, 15 carries. He had a long of 15 yards, and then everything else was nothing. Like, he's just not an efficient rusher, and I'm concerned that what we saw last year, it's not just related to the offensive line, and that even with upgrades on the O-line and a new offensive play caller, a new scheme, maybe that can improve White. But so far through week one, that's not been the case. And what we see is Bucky Irving, a day 3 rookie pick, already starting to play a decent amount. Look at last year, Rachaad White only played fewer than 70% of the snaps one time. And he was right at 70% in this game. Irvin played in 31% of the snaps. So yes, Irving, he did break off a big run in this game. It was a wide open hole. And I do think that it shouldn't be overblown, because if Rachaad White had just gotten that carry, he probably would have also had a big run too. So I don't want to overstate how much better Bucky Irving is, but Liam Cohen handpicked Bucky Irving over his guy, Ray Davis. He coached Ray Davis at Kentucky, and instead he drafted Bucky Irving instead from Oregon. So we heard offseason's coach speak about how they wanted to take off some of the touches and snaps from Rachaad White, and we saw that right away in week one. So again, I think White's floor is secure with the pass catching, but I feel like we could continue to see Bucky Irving work in steadily week by week, and suddenly you're not feeling as great about where you took Rachaad White. And I don't think it's so glaring, like not like the Travis Etienne where Tank Bigsby matched his carry total. It's not as glaring as that, but I mean, Bucky Irving looked pretty good too. So I don't think that the Buccaneers are looking at, hey, we got to get Bucky Irving less involved. I think that they're probably feeling pretty good about who they drafted in the 4th round of this year's draft. And they do want to take touches off of Rachaad White. So again, if he's not seeing as many carries, that does kind of hurt his bottom line a little bit. And so for those reasons, I think I can sell Rachaad White for a decent running back in return. So that's kind of my take on. And Irving, I think, is kind of an underrated prospect. I mean, I don't want to say he's kind of Kyren Williams-esque, but not over athletic, a little bit undersized, but really good pass catcher, really good vision. Something I look at is yards per snap or yards per play as college players. And he was top 5 in this class in that category. So again, he fell in the draft because he's undersized and not overly athletic, but that was what happened with Kyren Williams too. So again, I don't want to bury Rachaad White as someone that I think had upside heading into this year, but so far through week one, I don't feel better about Rachaad White, in a potential committee with Bucky Irving.
I can't really sell White because I didn't really get a lot of him during draft season. I just wasn't that interested at his cost. There were other players around him I liked better. Welsh, are you selling White where you have him?
I'm interested in doing it. I'm interested in him in full PPR because of the reception equity and like how he would be targeted. I do think Bucky Irving, you can't be dismissive of it. And I don't think a lot of people are right now. An interesting way that I would probably be, here's where I'd be more aggressive because I don't think he's done. I don't think Rachaad White's going to be done. I think he will still be the primary back the rest of the year, but there's going to be annoyances with it. If you happen to be someone that hit on a J.K. Dobbins and you have running back depth, the play actually might be trading Rachaad White to go and strengthen your wide receiver core to somebody that maybe has a weak running back core. And this seems like a prime guy because you can maybe like still pseudo sell him as like a top 12, 15 RB, and trading RB to RB, I think is a lot more difficult just in general. But in this specific instance, you would probably have to, you'd have to punch down for a running back, but a wide receiver, I don't know. I'm not saying you could go, you're not going to get, probably not going to get a London or a Chris Olave, but I'm not sure that that's like the worst thing. If that team has a really struggling RB core and you have the backup of like a Dobbins, like we talked about, to kind of help out your, your backfield. So I'm interested in it. I'm probably looking to downsize by getting wide receivers over trying to do running back to running back. But at the end of the day, I think there is some concern about Rachaad White and what he is going to be doing the rest of the season because this team does like Bucky Irving. Like he's not going away anytime soon.
Would you do Rachaad White for Malik Neighbors?
Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. And if you had like Dobbins or Pollard, like if Pollard was like your RB3 and you have that guy you can boost up as an RB2, getting a Malik Neighbors, 1,000%. Malik Neighbors is probably a little bit of concern. The only concern of him is watching Daniel Jones. And I think the little edge is cut off of like what the upside for Malik Neighbors can be because of Daniel Jones. I actually think that's a pretty good trade. That's a great trade right there. I would love to do.
Guys, low testosterone affects about 30% of adult men in America. Are you feeling the drag of fatigue, noticing a dip in muscle mass, or sensing a slump in libido? If so, it's time to get your testosterone levels tested. If you have low T, Kysotrex is an FDA-approved pill that's changing the game in testosterone replacement therapy. In fact, Kysotrex restored testosterone levels in nearly 9 out of 10 clinical study participants, and its unique formulation bypasses the liver to avoid liver damage. It's time to break free from injections, pellets, and gels. Choose Kysotrex and take a step toward being the hero of your life again. To learn more, visit Kysotrex.com. That's KYZATREX.com. By prescription only, Kysotrex is a controlled substance and can be a target of abuse. Kysotrex is not for use in pregnant women or men with prostate or breast cancer. Safety and efficacy in those younger than 18 is not known. Tell your doctor about all medical conditions and medications. Serious side effects could include increased blood pressure, worsening prostate symptoms, increased risk of prostate cancer, blood clots in the legs or lungs, decreased sperm count, liver problems, enlarged or painful breasts, and breathing problems while you sleep. Common side effects include swelling of the ankles, feet, or body, increased red blood cell count, and increase in prostate-specific antigen or PSA levels. PSA is a test used to detect prostate cancer. Report these symptoms to your doctor. Call your doctor to learn more about Kysotrex. For questions or more information, visit www.kysotrex.com or call 1-833-949-5040. All right, Welsh, who is your wide receiver to sell?
All right. I'm not going to probably be like amazing in the accuracy ranks this week because of this guy, because I was a little bit down on him. But Stefon Diggs is going to be the guy I'm going to pick on. And I know it's like, the touchdowns and everything. But at the end of the day, I view this as an opportunity to potentially get off of the third wide receiver in that offense if you can get a higher price because of what they did from the touchdown market. My concern, I guess, long-term is the targets went to Nico Collins and Tank Dell. They were your target leaders. They had Tank running out of the slot. The air yards on both of those players were phenomenal. Stefon Diggs, 14.1% yard share for the team and an 18.8% target share. An awesome 1.3 ADOT. They have two big play guys. Now, at the end of the day, red zone might be a thing that Stefon Diggs does play, and he might score a decent amount of touchdowns. And this is week one, but my take going into this was I really like Nico Collins is his own beast. But I really like Tank Dell, and I don't think they're going to go away from Tank Dell. He's a big explosive player. They didn't go away from him. He was the He was the targeted guy before Stefon Diggs. I still think Stefon Diggs, he's not the odd man out in the offense. He's just the guy that is relative to his touchdown. If he didn't have touchdowns, I would have been 100% right this week because he wasn't doing a whole lot of anything else. So I'm going to take this opportunity to potentially try to sell Stefon Diggs as a top 20, 24 wide receiver this week. Consolidate, whether it's buying maybe a little bit low on a wide receiver or moving into another spot or an RB, because I just don't think the touchdown equity is not something you can count on. And week one was a bit of a representation. If you just look at target share, yard share, and deep threat, he is really none of those things at this point. So this is also a little bit of bias. I had him as the third wide receiver in this in this trio anyway. So I am selling Stefon Diggs.
Erickson, what do you think?
My issue with selling Stefon Diggs is I just don't want to sell this Texans offense. That's my concern. We talked about Joe Mixon had 30 carries, and yet we still had receivers hitting in this offense. Both Nico Collins and Stefon Diggs were both productive for your fantasy lineups. How many times does that happen where the running back gets 30 carries and somehow the offense still produces two receivers and Tank Dell wasn't even that horrible? So yeah, I understand with the role, he did not see the air yards, but that role is concrete. Again, you don't want to chase but sometimes they're outlier touchdown seasons with certain players. I do agree that Diggs would be the guy you have to put on the block among the Texans receivers because of the touchdowns, but what if that's his role? Hey, we're in the red zone. Hey, we're giving the ball to Stefon Diggs because he's that crafty veteran receiver that knows how to get open in the red zone, right? So where Nico Collins and Tank Dell, yes, they're going to generate those big plays. That's not Diggs' role. Oh, it's red zone time. Oh, where are we going? Where's number one? Like it's Stefon Diggs. So yes, that is the concern with selling on Diggs. And again, showing my biases, I was a bit higher on Stefon Diggs in the offseason. I thought he was the number 2 guy. I thought I ranked him very close to Nico Collins, who I did still as the number 1 guy. If anything, I would use Diggs maybe as a piece to get up to Nico Collins. Like that's what I would try to do. I want to upgrade from receiver if I have Stefon Diggs, but again, I'm not trying to move off him because, dude, this Texans offense might just be this legit. I mean, it's only one week and it was against the Colts defense, but I mean, CJ Stroud looks like an MVP, and I want all of his receivers if I have them on my team. So that's the only push.
It's not like it's a surprise, right? Like we were very high on this Texans offense. So
right, but there were concerns about the pecking order, and I mean, it was
but I'm saying it's not a surprise that the offense looks like it could be going nuclear this year. So don't say, oh, it's week 1. Who knows what the offense will look like long term? No, this is what we expected, was that the offense would be really good. We just didn't know kind of where the targets would go.
And I think that with all of these trades, like if everyone hasn't got it, we opened the show to mention like, hey, we don't want to be overreactionary. When we talk about buy and sell, it's a lot about also specifically the sell. It's about testing the market. Let's see what the market is. For me, I'm not telling you get out from Stefon Diggs. I'm testing the market to see if someone is, he is maybe going to be the number 1 guy and he's going to score 12 touchdowns. I don't think you want to make any drastic moves with anything that we've done. You want to test the market out for week 1 because we are preaching some patience with all of this.
Erickson, I want to get to your wide receiver to sell, and I was shocked when I saw you put this name in.
Well, I struggled trying to actually find a wide receiver to sell because I didn't really find any obvious. I would have probably put Deebo Samuel if I had able to do it before or after the Monday night game. But I settled on Cooper Kupp. And maybe this is my biasy because I was not high on Cooper Kupp. So if that's how you're viewing this, listening to it, then you can just ignore everything I'm saying. But his value is through the roof, right? It's basically a first round pick, right? If we redrafted today, Cooper Kupp would be drafted in the first round, given the injury to Puka Nacua, given that he had 21 targets in this past game, 14 passes, 110 yards, and a touchdown. I guess my concern is, okay, well, how sustainable? Is he going to get 21 targets every single week? I don't think so. Again, this Rams offensive line has injuries. They have 3 guys down among their starters. So they're bringing in free agents to bolster the offensive line. Again, this isn't about, hey, you got to fade Kupp. It's about you can pick your choice. Like, who can you get for Cooper Kupp? Jamar Chase? You might be able to. Justin Jefferson? I mean, Kupp, again, if we were drafting today, he would be a first-round pick. So, yes, he's skyrocketed up the rankings, but you can get so much for him. And that's the reason why he would be my sell-high receiver. Again,
would you trade...
I think he looks like a league winner, though. Like, I think he should be a first-round pick if we redrafted today. And, like it's knowing that Puka is going to miss some time. Like that is a very key element to this. Like maybe he's not going to get 21 targets every game. I don't see why he can't get 15 with Puka out. I mean, like he looked like he did in the Triple Crown season. I'm not saying he's going to win the Triple Crown this year, but I'm like very excited about Kupp. And I'm the places where I got him. I think I got a first round receiver in the 4th round or wherever it was.
The interesting thing about what you're saying too is like if you redrafted right now with this situation, I don't know if Kupp doesn't go before Chase, and he's not like the 3rd or 4th wide receiver.
So you would rather have Kupp than Chase? Like again, if that's the market I can get, I'll take Chase. But
maybe okay. But would you trade Kupp to get Achane? What we talked about bringing it back?
No. Again,
okay. Well,
we're
talking about Achane.
You're trading I mean, look, he's valued as a 1st round pick now, and you didn't draft him in the 1st round. That's all I'm trying to say. Again, I struggled trying to figure out a wide receiver to sell. I would have put Debo here if I had done the show sheet first. But Kupp to me was just who can you get literally anything for a player that had concerns entering the year, and that's why he fell. It's Cooper Kupp. So again, you could get Chase, Jefferson. Like those guys are in the same range as Cooper Kupp, and I would prefer those guys. And again, maybe this is my bias because I was down on Kupp and maybe I haven't readjusted. So I'm just trying to be transparent. Again, I was lower on Kupp and I'm taking that L so far. But yeah, so that's just the way I
wonder what the 2-for-1 market would look like with Kupp. I like this is back to that Achane thing where I'm like, how many more players are there above Kupp that make sense in a trade? I wonder what you would pull the trigger on in some type of a 2-for-1. Like, what if it's Achane and like I don't know, George Pickens, and someone's offering you that for Cooper Kupp?
No, I mean, I think you should get more. I mean, Worm just said he's a league winner, right? So
Malik Neighbors,
you should be getting a guy that was like 1st round draft, like a 1st round capital player.
I would trade him for Achane and Neighbors combined. I think that's a deal where I would rather get the 2 than the 1, especially because like when Puka comes back, maybe it does look differently. But right now, like
that's what I mean. Like his value is so high right now. It's crazy.
You're not
high.
wrong.
And what if he just doesn't get 21 targets next week? Right? Like what if he has a down week? Then
but again, I think a down week for Cooper Kupp, as long as Puka is not playing, is still going to be like a down week will be 12 targets. Like he's not going to get 4 targets in a game.
But okay, it took him 21 targets to get to 110 yards. 21 targets. So you cut that in half, right? Is he going over 100 yards if he only gets 12 targets? That's, again, like I don't want to be defending my take because I was wrong about Kupp, right? Because I was fading him. But I'm looking at where he's viewed in the market, like you said, as a 1st round pick. Like you can get so much for him. And
there's an injury history. That's also the thing you didn't even throw into all of that. That he's the highest value. He's probably going to be at any point this year. And there's an injury history. Just bring it all together again. See what the market is. See if someone's willing to do something bonkers. I think Worm and I are both a little bit tenuous about moving off of Kupp in this, but you never know what someone's going to do. You never know the craziness. Someone watched Garrett Wilson and they're like, what's with those arm pads? What's with this jersey? I don't like this. He's not getting all the targets. And they trade Garrett Wilson and then they trade you, I don't know, Joe Mixon. They don't believe in Joe Mixon. You never know what craziness can happen. So you should test the waters.
And if you totally disagree with me, just sell high on Debo then. Okay. That will be my pivot to sell high on Debo, which I know Welsh will co-sign on.
Yeah, I mean, they did. Yeah. Well, Brandon Ayuk is coming. Christian McCaffrey, maybe he'll be healthy at one point and play ever if they stop lying. But maybe.
Yeah. The sort of to put a bow on the Kupp that the point I want to quickly make is that like before Puka came along and before the injuries were a thing, like Cooper Kupp was considered like a top 8 pick in drafts. Puka is now not in the picture for at least a month. Possibly longer. We'll see it, who knows? And as of right now, he's healthy. So like for me, like I'm just viewing him as like a top 10 player for the next month. And we'll see what happens after that. I'm not worried that he only had 110 yards on 21 targets or anything like that. I just think he looks very clearly like an elite wide receiver right now. But if you are somebody who says like, I just really love Chase, like fine. Like I think that's a reasonable move to make, but I wouldn't sell him for anybody lower than a tier 1 receiver, in my opinion. That's kind of how I agree.
This is, you should get the farm for Cooper Kupp. That's all I'm saying. Just his equity.
And you made that clear. I gave you Pickens and Achane, and you're like, no, that's not enough. So you are standing firm in what you're saying. You got to get the house.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up with a little game of buy, sell, or hold. I'll give you guys a running back trio, and then I'll give you a wide receiver trio, and you're going to pick from each of them one guy to buy, one guy to sell, and one guy to hold. For running back, Chase Brown, Tyjae Spears, and Jaleel McLaughlin. Welsh, which one of them are you buying? Which one are you selling? And which one are you holding?
I'm going to buy Jaleel McLaughlin, hold Chase Brown, and sell Tyjae Spears. I think that's pretty easy. I think Tyjae Spears is, especially with what we've all said, is the clear sell here because of what Tony Pollard is. I think the balance is going to be, are you buying the dip on Chase Brown right now, or is it Jaleel McLaughlin? And for me, it's easy. McLaughlin, he got the carries early on. He got the receptions, and he's going to continuously be targeted. This team is not good. They're going to have to be throwing out of the back. Bo Nix is not good for as long as he's quarterback, so he's going to be throwing short yardage stuff to McLaughlin. I don't know if it'll ever be good, but McLaughlin feels like the guy to buy on. And I'm a little bit down on Chase Brown. It was week one. You don't want to be overreacting, but Zach Moss did get a lot of the run. He's going to be their goal line guy. They're also willing to throw him the ball. So I would hold on Chase Brown to see what materializes, but buy McLaughlin and sell that Tyjae.
Erickson, I'm curious to hear your answer here, particularly on Brown, because you called in last week's Thursday show Zach Moss scoring a touchdown in week one. You said the Chase Brown breakout was going to come after week one. So I'm curious if you're still kind of holding to that.
Yes, Zach Moss has won the battle, but the war is not over in the Bengals backfield. So look, the Bengals offense wasn't good in week one featuring Zach Moss. He dropped multiple passes in the game. The thing that I noticed the most watching that game was no explosiveness, no juice from the Bengals offense. Who's the juice back? It's Chase Brown. So I'm going to buy Chase Brown, cut Tyjae Spears, and I'm going to hold McLaughlin.
Let's go to the wide receiver trio. Zay Flowers, Christian Kirk, Diontae Johnson. Erickson, we'll start with you this time.
So this one's going to be weird. So I'm going to buy Flowers because I think that he's super involved in the Ravens offense, still sees a ton of targets. I just like Zay Flowers. Good rookie season. So I'm going to buy him. This one, I'm actually going to pivot. I'm actually going to cut Christian Kirk. We saw this last year where he started really slowly in week one and then he ended up bouncing back. But I think I mentioned on the show last week, but I just love Brian Thomas, man. And there's no reason after what I saw in week one to get off of him potentially being the alpha in this passing game. Again, Kirk has been dealing with this calf injury. He looked way out of sync with Trevor Lawrence. They were not on the same page whatsoever. He was not that underneath target, that safety blanket like we've seen in the past. And maybe that's Evan Ingram. Like Ingram and Christian Kirk both had bad games, but they overlap in terms of where they're used on the field. So I am worried about Christian Kirk. And with Diontae Johnson, maybe it's really easy to just say, hey, you just got to cut him. The Carolina Panthers are so horrible. I looked at last year, and you know who was also horrible last year was Adam Thielen in week one. And we saw what happened in week two. This is when he started to see a ton of targets from Bryce Young as his number one receiver. So I think that I'm actually willing to throw another bone towards Diontae Johnson, give him one more chance, and maybe move off Kirk before things get worse. So that's the way I'm viewing it. And I wasn't really sure about Kirk versus Diontae. I originally had hold Kirk and cut Diontae. But yeah, that's my take.
Welsh, what do you think?
Exact same. Flowers is the easy buy here for first reads. They had that little slant route. It was like what the Chiefs did with Rashee Rice. They were doing with Flowers. He's the easy buy. I think you can cut both of those other two. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I flip-flop both of them. I think like that Jaguars offense worked with Kirk last year when Calvin was in the Brian Thomas role, but I like what Brian Thomas looks like. The Panthers looked absolutely atrocious, looked like the worst team in the NFL. Bryce Young looking as bad as he did in his rookie year is not a good sign. That's not a good sign at all. Can they bounce back? Yeah, maybe. I think there's a lot of underlying stuff that obviously work well with Diontae Johnson. He's a ball hawk. So I guess by that, like, to me, Diontae is the number one in the Panthers offense, and Kirk is like 3 or 4, like something like, you don't know. You don't know what it's going to be. Brian Thomas looks like the explosive play guy. Evan Ingram wasn't involved. They're going to fix that. You do have Etienne. It's a better offense in Jacksonville, but Kirk is somewhere between like 3 and 4. Panthers are a garbage pile, but Diontae Johnson is the guy standing on top of the garbage pile. They have no running game. They've got Thielen. I'll go with Diontae as the hold and Kirk as the cut as well.
So Zay Flowers seems like a strong buy. You can use the trade analyzer at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the MyPlaybook app to instantly evaluate how any trade will affect your team for this week, the rest of the season, or even in Dynasty. Guys, we got through the Tuesday show, first of the season. We've got a bunch more to go the rest of the year. So I had fun. Hopefully everybody, learned a couple of things and can go out and make some fun trades here. Trading is a really fun part of fantasy season, so I like doing this show. every single week during the year because it's, I don't like waivers. I saw Fitz was tweeting this earlier, like, oh boy, 30 teams like seemed like a good idea in August, and now I got to do waivers. Like, that's my least favorite part of fantasy. Trading is fun. Drafting is obviously the best, but trading is super fun too. So I'm looking forward to the show for the rest of the year. For Welsh and for Erickson, I am Ryan Wormeli. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.